Alright, so I'm going to talk about the Citicorp Center. This is Group AE. Alright, so first we'll talk about the events that occurred. In 1977, structural engineer William Lemessurier designed a building, the Citicorp Center in New York. This building initially gathered a lot of attention because of its notable features. It was the seventh largest building in the world. It was the first building of its size to have a tuned mass dampener, and it was built on these stilts that were placed at the edges. It's important to note that these stilts were placed in the middle of the edges and not at the corners of the building. As per regulations, he was required to measure the greatest wind forces acting on the building. Almost always, this occurs when the winds are facing perpendicular to the face of the building. However, Lemessurier neglected winds coming from a 45-degree angle, also known as quartering winds. In June, 1 year later after its construction, a Princeton University engineering student, Diane Hartley, was working on a report about the Citicorp building. She concluded that the building was not sufficient to withstand high quartering winds. She contacted Lemessurier's firm to notify him of her findings. At the same time, Lemessurier learned that his construction of the building had been done with bolts instead of welds. The use of bolts were a weaker selection, however, they still sufficed for the normal facing winds. Just to clarify, both the overlooked quartering winds and the substitution to bolts were both necessary to put the building at risk. So at this time, Lemessurier immediately did some recalculations and concluded that the quartering winds were indeed 40% stronger than he expected. He notified the head architect, Hugh Stubbins, and the Citicorp owners with the issue and then proposed a solution. This issue was discovered in June, and for the next 3 months, construction crews worked in the building welding steel plates over the 200 bolted joints. These repairs took place only overnight after the workday, in secrecy from the general public, and without the knowledge of the daily workers in the building. Lemessurier did the repairs in secret to avoid hysteria from the public and to prevent his professional reputation from being ruined. Since there were no major consequences of the covert operation, the crisis was kept from the public's knowledge for almost 20 years. Moving on to the legal analysis for this case, we can see that it is a tort law case whereby a duty of care is owed. The precedents for this case is Winnipeg Condominium versus Bird Construction. The parties involved were Lemessurier, the defendant, and the Citicorp owners as the plaintiff. We can see this is a tort case because it passes the legal test, whereby Lemessurier owed a duty of care, being the structural engineer. He failed his duty of care when the building was vulnerable, and then damages occurred, resulting in Citicorp having to pay for the repairs. Lemessurier and his firm are liable for the damages caused. They will be responsible for direct damages to Citicorp. If taken to court, the most likely outcome would be that Lemessurier and his firm would have to pay for the direct damages they caused the Citicorp owners. Moving on to the ethical analysis, we can say that Lemessurier was acting in professional misconduct. We can see that he was negligent, where he did not treat the wind forces with enough importance. We can say he failed to report unsafe situations, where he kept the status of the building a secret. And we can say he failed to comply with the laws of the area, when he failed to measure the greatest wind forces acting on it. We could also say that Lemessurier failed to follow the code of ethics, when he had a duty to the profession which he did not follow. He kept the secret of the building a secret for over 20 years. This was valuable information that could have been used by other engineers for future projects. Additionally, Lemessurier had a duty to the public welfare, but he jeopardized it when he failed to report the unsafe building that was constructed. We can see that Lemessurier had a few options. His first option would be to not tell anyone and to do the repairs in secret. His second option would be to tell his engineering firm but not tell the clients. And his third option would be to tell both the engineering firm and the clients about the situation so that they can work together. The issue with the first two solutions is that it does not inform the client about the current situation. Additionally, this also counts as failing to report unsafe work. The decision Lemessurier should take would be option 3, where he tells his clients and the engineering firm about the situation and they work together to get to a solution. In fact, this is what Lemessurier did, and we can see that it was the best ethical decision to take. Thank you for your time. This has been Group AE on the Citicorp Center case.